Welcome to today's panel. It's the second Lucas industry panel today, facing reality documentaries for young audiences. My name is Helene Gerritsen. I'm a producer and the head of film festival Go East, which is also organized by DFF. And I was asked by the Lucas team to moderate today's panel, which I'm very happy to do. This panel takes place, as you have noticed, both via Zoom and here on the ground in the cinema. Before I introduce myself and our panel, maybe first of all, some practical information. Most of you already know the drill, I guess. But for those of you who are in the audience via Zoom, we can't see you, we can't hear you. But if you experience technical difficulties, you can communicate with our Zoom host via the chat. And also during the last 15 minutes of today's panel, there will be an opportunity to ask questions also via the chat. If you're here in the cinema, then we have the lovely organization manager of Lucas here, Olaf, who will be our microphone runner. So feel free to ask your questions. So yeah, why are we organizing this panel? I think that those of us who are cinephile parents, educators, or work with children and youngsters, we all know this problem. It's much easier to find crappy entertainment for kids than it is to actually find meaningful films that are interesting, challenging, and or contributing to arts education for kids. And the truth is, it is challenging to produce documentaries for young audiences. It is challenging to find those audiences. And it can also be very challenging to find ways of making a documentary that young people actually want to watch. But it is possible. And our panelists today are here to prove it and share some of their experiences. So first up on the screen here, we have Allison Snyder, a filmmaker and producer from the USA, and a participant of the Lucas competition with her film Us Kids. Also from the USA, we have producer and filmmaker Cole Sachs. Welcome. Maarten Schmidt, joining us from San Sebastian today, is a producer usually based in Belgium. His production company Storyhouse has, I think he's frozen, right? Maarten, can you please switch off and come back again and maybe find a charger? Anyway, he's great, and his production company Storyhouse has considerable experience with non-fiction content for children and young audiences. Then we have here on my right, Eroll Bilibani, who came all the way from Kosovo. He's a producer, but he's also in charge of the industry program of DOKUFEST in Prizren, a festival with an extensive program for children and young audiences. Reichert, on my direct right, is in charge of Dok.education, the year-round program organized by DOKUFEST Munich. And last but not least, we have Brigid O'Shea. Many of you might know her. She was in charge of Doc Leipzig industry program for many years and founded the Documentary Association of Europe in 2020, a European network for documentary film professionals. So we have a full panel and we will jump right into it. And since we are in Europe here, I would like to start with the Americans. To give us an American perspective, because the way documentaries are being produced and distributed in the US tends to be quite different from the way we do things in Europe. And there are some cultural differences as well, maybe between the continents, as well as different viewing habits, which is why it's so interesting that we compare these two perspectives today. So I would suggest actually, Kim, that we start with taking a look at the trailer of your film, Us Kids, and then we can talk about your creative approach and the production background of your film. So can we please see the trailer of Us Kids?
Before all of this, we were normal ass kids doing normal ass things.
Sometimes life takes you in a different direction and you gotta go.
In just 6 minutes and 20 seconds, 17 hearts stopped beating.
And I saw Emma on TV, and I remember just like looking up to her and thinking, wow, I can do that.
one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to make it happen.
Can you tell me right now that you will not accept a single donation from the NRA? And then shit went down.
I am here today to acknowledge and represent the African American girls whose stories don't make the front page of every national newspaper.
Become involved today by voting for policies that won't get you killed tomorrow. They're gonna shoot through the window. If they kill me, they prove my point.
You guys are being huge. The thing is, people are dead.
I'm excited because I have not seen a movement like this since 1963.
And right now, the future looks like it's there. It's in front of us. And it's up to us to do whatever we want with it.
So if maybe there was some time lag, you can also find the trailer online. And you can watch the entire film online here also in the Lucas program. Kim, in your film, you followed a group of high school kids from Florida who started the March of Our Lives movement for gun control after they experienced the terrible school shooting at their own high school. When you started making this film, what was your motivation and what target audience did you have in mind? Because to me, it seems that you are not solely targeting young audiences. You're trying to get the point of view of this new generation of kids that are politically active across, is my impression. If you switch on your microphone.
Sorry about that. Thanks for having me. I had made a previous film in 2016 called that was about the tragedy of the school shooting in Connecticut that a lot of people around the world might remember, where 20 school children were shot in their elementary school and 6 teachers. And I landed in that happenstantially, honestly, and then spent 3 years with that community. So that was a sort of study on grief, and it had a lot of adult grief in it. But I kind of couldn't let go of the stories of the kids that escaped, these first graders who watched their friends killed, and just really thought about the trauma and the PTSD, and if this country was asking the question of what the repercussions were for a traumatized nation. So those first graders, some years later, I was working on another project in Florida. Did not intend to make another movie that had to do with gun violence or anything like it. But I found myself in Florida when that shooting happened at that high school. And now it was high schoolers. It wasn't first graders. And a lot of them were little kids growing up in this generation. And I really just felt this different moment that was all about rage and frustration. And I wanted to capture emotionally more than grief, rage, and frustration. And I really wanted it to be the voices of that demographic of high schoolers. So we intentionally didn't really put many adults in the film. And honestly, even though I think it's a film that hopefully reads to both young audiences and older generations, it was more important for me that that kids, the age of the kids in it, really felt represented their voices in a way with integrity.
Yeah, well, I think that you succeeded in that. The protagonists are extremely important in this film. They really carry the film. They are partly well known because of their activism, and they were in the media a lot, but yet you show them in a quite personal, very vulnerable way. How did you get access to them, and how did you work with them? What was that experience like?
There were, I guess, 2 key moments. One, I had made this film that got out there, and people in survivor communities had a certain amount of respect and trust that I did it, hopefully without exploiting or in a way that re-traumatized the community. And so it was always important for me with that first film and this film that the process of the filmmaking be something that was collaborative and cathartic for them and healing in some way. And early on, I sat with Ex Gonzalez, formerly known as Emma, and her family for 4 or 5 hours. And they had had a lot of press. And so it was just a lot of conversation about what that would be like, and decided that the group decided that the kids decided that I could be allowed to go on the road for 2 months to follow them to 50 cities as they tried to go out and talk to the country about what they were doing. And I think the second thing is that there's a subject, Samantha, who was shot in her classroom and survived, not before seeing her good friend killed beside her. And she, to me, represented the spine of the movie, really, because it wasn't just about activism. It was the idea that these kids set out to avenge the deaths of their friends based on this backbone of trauma that a lot of Gen Z, I think, is experiencing in this country. So Samantha was that voice of just strength and coming out of trauma. And we connected early on and just had a really good chemistry. So so it was 3 years of digging in like an onion, a little bit like so many of us do with documentaries. And I think it was just a ton of time off camera and a lot of stuff I don't always do, which is really sitting with them in hotel rooms and showing them clips and saying, what do you think? And then
that was my next question. Did they see like the final film and what their reactions? But they were, so it was quite collaborative the way you describe it, like when you show them clips in the process of filming.
Yeah, sometimes I really took to heart whether it be the order of something. I mean, I showed them clips, I showed them edited segments. I didn't do it just because I wanted to check a box of, okay, I kind of I really truly wanted their perspective. One of the things that was so important early on to the kids in Parkland, they, even before George Floyd was killed, they were so not, not tone deaf to the idea of racial, that you can't talk about gun violence in America without talking about racial inequity and racial justice. And so it was important for the subjects that joined on, that we depict, that join the movement, who are from Black and brown communities, that we were all sitting and sort of talking about that needed to be represented in the correct way, that as how I saw it as we rolled across America. I mean, they would do media, and the media would want like Emma and David because they were famous, and they would never do an interview unless it was with a local kid beside them. So there were lots of things like that we shared. And then in the end, they all came to Sundance, where we premiered the whole group. And it was just, we were very lucky because we did get that premiere like a minute under the wire before the world fell apart with the pandemic. And then South by, where we were headed to, got canceled. And, so this is actually really a treat, because we've missed, as so many people have coming out of the last year, that experience of being in international audiences. And but it was a very special moment at Sundance, where we saw the final film together, experienced it with audiences. It was one of those memorable things. They laughed, they cried, and we all sat and held hands. It was great.
And can you tell us a bit about the production and financing of your film? I mean, you had a topic that probably really gave you momentum, but still, was it hard to get it all together? And what was your budget, if it's not a secret?
The budget was, bigger than some I've done for documentaries, because we went to 50 cities and followed the whole Road to Change, the Road to Change thing. It was somewhere between $1.5 million and $2 million, I think. And let's see, the other piece, how I financed it. A lot of credit I give to the Sundance community. We worked with them. They have an amazing program called Catalyst, where they bring together funders who are creative investors who are interested in documentary. As you probably know, it's in some ways more challenging in the States, outside of, early on there were streamers that did come to me, and honestly, that was such a it's so different than now. Even a couple of years later, I was at a panel yesterday about what's happening with the advent of the streamers, but I was hesitant to give up all those rights and get in early because I felt I needed to keep control of this for the sake of the kids. I felt like I had to keep my word to them that this would be a film that, especially since part of the film is commenting on the media. I felt like I didn't want to be one of these holier than thou people who are like, oh, X talks about 60 Minutes and how it felt so shallow and superficial. And so I needed to feel like we were, how independent documentary is different. And it's only different if you can keep, some integrity in rendering. In the end, to be quite honest, I can say here, doing it that way had its, how should I say, repercussions with certain streamers feeling that this in the end was a bit too partisan as they saw it. It wasn't set out to be, of course it's political, but I think I saw it the way that my the kids in the film saw it, which is this issue is a public health crisis, that it shouldn't be a partisan, but things have gotten so crazy and polarized in our country that there was a lot, and we hadn't had our election. So while I was releasing and on the road, I can say that it's the first time in my lifetime that I felt the politics of the country and the fact that Trump was still in office had bearing on people being a bit afraid of the film, to be honest, and it read partisan.
So bizarre for me to hear that people call it partisan, because there's then this misunderstanding that a documentary is an objective thing, where it's always a subjective thing. It's a piece of art. It's a point of view of someone. So accusing it of being partisan, it's you're not making a propaganda film. You're following an actual movement and giving views behind the scenes. So that, to me, it sounds utterly bizarre.
Yeah, it felt that way to me. I mean, it would be one thing if I set out with an agenda to have a political agenda, but as you said, you can't follow the point of view of kids who are rightfully enraged by the inaction of the government toward a situation that is taking the lives of their friends and is the #1 killer of youth. It's just unbelievable. It supersedes every other cause of death in the United States right now. And for young Black men, it's like 10 times that. So of course it's subjective, and there are certain politicians that were owned by the NRA and they wanted to talk about it. So I didn't clean them up. I didn't clean up their cursing, because I really, distribution wise, these things do have their, I just didn't think hard about it. I was sort of like, okay. So now we are doing a college campus tour, but it was really kind of shocking to learn the extent to which, maybe I was naive, to which in that time when we rolled out, leading up, that very window of leading up to an election, that people were just, it was, I think, the most historic, certainly in my lifetime, election. So that played into the whole distribution situation for sure.
Mm. Thanks so much, Kim. I would like to stay in the US a little bit and go to Cole. You most recently made a film called World Debut about the introduction of what used to be essentially street sports embedded in subculture to the Olympics. So you have really very different topics in comparison to Kim. My question is, how do you find your topics? Are these things that you have a passion for yourself, and what audiences do you target in the first place?
Yeah, that's a great question. And also just want to say thanks for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. I think with the stories that I look at and the stories that I try to tell, I always try to find a story that I have some type of personal connection to. I think those stories as a filmmaker are the ones that not only you'll be, I think, able to tell at a high level, but the fire will also keep you going, depending on the documentary. I mean, there's such long endeavors. They can be long endeavors. And if they're not long endeavors and they're on a compressed timeline like our film, then you just need to have some mental stamina, physical stamina to just keep going with it. And it's always nice to kind of go back to that big idea of like, why am I doing this? And so with those counterculture sports, so skateboarding, surfing, and sport climbing, me being in Salt Lake City, Utah, it's a great outdoor community, and just growing up around those sports, I felt very natural to explore a story about it. Funny enough, when we were making it, I mean, the creative was very different. It was a follow doc of athletes trying to become the first ever to compete. Once we started taking the project out and shopping it to different networks, the network that commissioned the project actually proposed the idea of, well, what if it's about how these sports got into the Olympic Games, which kind of gave us a unique point of view to go into the underbelly, so to speak, of the International Olympic Committee and kind of observe what is happening here with the Olympics. Why are the Olympics wanting to invite something that is so counterculture, so different, tonality wise from what the other sports in the games are.
So when on the one hand you're dealing with subculture, but on the other hand you're dealing with the Olympic Commission and you have to finance this thing, and then you have to develop a strategy. How are people actually going to see it? How did that come together for you? Because as far as I understood, you did most of it yourself.
So, I mean, it was a project that was fully commissioned by a network. We did a ton of, myself and two other filmmakers that I work with, we did a ton of work up front, just trying to like shape and mold what the story is. Attach the right characters. We got Tony Hawk on board as an executive producer, Emily Harrington, who's a climbing phenom in her sport, Pat O'Connell in the surf industry as well. So we got all these, trusted voices that wanted to participate in it, which really helped us not only with talking to people, but also when we were taking this project out. So, we partnered with a production studio called Boardwalk Pictures. And then from there, collectively, we started shopping it to different networks, like from the get-go. And the network that ended up picking it up was YouTube Originals. So YouTube Originals commissioned the project in full. And what I mean by commission the project is they're the financial support, the sole financial support of the project. And they're the ones that really wanted to see this come to life before the Tokyo Olympic Games. So
what kind of projects do they usually commission? And would you say this is a good platform for films for young audiences?
It's interesting. It's a 90-minute featured documentary on a platform where people watch 5-minute and shorter films. So, I don't know. YouTube obviously knows what's working for them and what isn't working for them, but I know for a fact that YouTube is just a great place for young people to go and watch this type of story, these stories about these counterculture sports. So
will the film be available in full for free, or how does that work?
So it's available for free. You can go to YouTube and type in World Debut and it'll come up there. It released before the Tokyo Games, which was really exciting. And so far, the response has been very positive. And, I'm just happy that the IOC was letting us do a lot of things that were very uncomfortable for them to speak about, uncomfortable to, from music to swearing to just embracing, sports that kind of are like the antithesis of the Olympics. And the IOC was very, I think they held up a mirror, so to speak, in this film to say, hey, what's wrong with our organization? How can we change, and how can we own what we need to change? So.
Okay, thanks. Well, in Europe, it's funny to me that you call it a network and then it's YouTube originals, because to me, from a European perspective, that sounds like two different things, because here we very much rely on TV broadcasters, which we call networks, like the old-fashioned ones, even though online platforms become more important, of course, and as financiers, and we get state funding and grants too. But broadcasters, I think, essentially remain the main partner for documentary production. And so, Maarten, I would like to go to you. You're based in Belgium with your company, a country which, together with, I would say, Scandinavia and the Netherlands, has a good reputation when it comes to content for children. So before we show a trailer for one of your projects, I would like to ask how you finance most of your films for young audiences, and what are the opportunities you have as a producer based in Belgium?
Hello, thanks for inviting me. Also great to see the work of Kim and Cole. Congrats on that, looks amazing. So first of all, my company that I founded in 2013 is called Storyhouse, and I have three main focuses, and one of the focuses is, as I call them, youth and focus projects. And so it started actually when I worked in the Netherlands. When I used to work in the Netherlands, and there I saw how they produced youth documentaries, and that was really interesting for me. And founding my own company in Belgium, I was always looking for a youth project. And then Frederike Michom came to me with a story about a young girl in Brussels who wants to become a rapper. And I was like, yeah, that could be my chance, my opportunity to show that we can do youth content here in Belgium, to convince the financiers, so the broadcasters, youth broadcaster, and my local fund. And we did it. And it was very hard because first youth broadcaster didn't want to be a part of it. But we got a pre-sale from a Dutch broadcaster, EO. And at the end, we got the Flemish Film Fund also on board. But it became an example of what it is to make youth documentaries. So youth documentaries we make are 15 minutes and mostly aimed at age group of around 12. And that became as
they started a scheme, right? So there's like
that was
per year.
So at that point, we encouraged also the film fund to talk with the broadcaster, which they did, and we had a great example because the film was shown internationally on film festivals, Syndicate, and a lot of others, and it proved them of okay, this is worthwhile looking at, and then they launched the scheme. 2 years later, and now we do 5 documentaries for youth audiences a year. So this year will be the 4th year. Now they selected the filmmakers. So in 3 years' time, we already produced 15 short films for youth, short documentaries for youth audiences. And before there were none. So that's amazing.
Well, you make it sound very easy, like you as a, but it also shows the power.
It was not easy.
I know.
Yeah.
No, it shows the power of the producers potentially, but also the advantages sometimes of living in a small country where you have direct access to your broadcasters, and you can actually get people around the table. But I think we come to this later, because I think your association, Brigid, can also play a role like this in stimulating certain funding schemes. So yes, you made a very touching and at the same time formally very inventive film called Boos, Angry, about children with, I would say, anger management issues, for lack of a better word, that receive special treatment for it. And I think we have a trailer, right? Let's watch that.
Bijka, dat is dus kindersituatie. Ja, Bier. Ik kan dat woord niet uitspreken. Kinderpsychiatrie? Ja. We zijn niet stom. We hebben alleen een probleem. Ik ben hier gekomen omdat ik heel vaak boos word. En dan ga ik door het lint. Boos, maar boos, maar boos, maar boos. Totdat ik ontplof.
Deep inside the world of hell is where you belong, can't tell.
Yeah.
Thanks, Maarten. It's a beautiful
Yeah,
trailer.
it's amazing. Yeah. I'm so happy with this project.
I love it. People are so enthusiastic about their own work. But, if we can look at this as a mini case study, perhaps, can you tell us where the idea for the film came from, how it was produced, and also, very important, how this film reached its audiences?
First of all, about the filmmaker, Frederica Mihom. So she's the one who came to me 5 years ago with this story, first youth documentary about a young kid who wanted to become a rapper. And immediately I knew like Frederica had a lot of talent. Since then, she's also done a feature-length fiction for children, which was shown in Sundance and which won the ECFA Youth Best Youth Film, European Youth Film of the Year award at Berlinale last year. And it was really cool to work with her on this project. And she said like, because we started 3 years ago, when I discovered a working group for children who couldn't attend school, who were getting tuition from home. And we talked about doing a series. And then she looked into it. She said, like, I don't see the potential for a series. And then she visited the youth psychiatry hospital. And she said, like, I want to do something with this. And immediately we know, okay, if we do this, we cannot show the children. We have to do it anonymously. So, and then she said, okay, well, we'll only do voice recordings on my own, also to safeguard a safe space and just to interact one-on-one with the children. Then she gave them little throwaway cameras just to take pictures of how they see, because they stay in this psychiatric hospital for 6 weeks. So we gave them little throwaway cameras in which they could take pictures from their perspective. And also the child you hear singing, that's someone who's there. So that's a young kid who's there. And so she really was immersed in the process. And she also worked as an intern, actually. So Frederica worked for an intern at that facility for 2 weeks. So she was really immersed in how the way things go there. And then, okay, we entered now. Before we had to struggle to access financing, but now we have this program. So she entered the program, she got the funding, and then we further developed the idea around anger management issues, and then we got the visual artist on board who did the light animation, etc. And that was basically it. I mean, this we did over a course of 1 year and a half. So production, so from like really applying for financing to delivery was 1 year and a half. That's 18 months.
This is also a project that was commissioned, right?
It's not commissioned, it's from our own, but because we have this program that funds 5 documentaries, new documentaries a year, it comes from our perspective as a proposal, but then it's not really commissioned. So the youth broadcaster has to invest in this. They don't have a choice. So they already signed into this program years ago, but they love this program now. They really embrace it. They're like, wow, these are amazing films. We love it. So, and now the film is at Syndicate selected also. And yeah, what is nice and what happened last year because of COVID is that a lot of film festivals where the film is selected also offer a screening fee for SVOD rights just for their own territory. Syndicate does it, Leipzig does it, Novi Horizonte does it, and a few others that I forgot, sorry. But that's really important to get some financial, because apart from the financing we get from the broadcaster and the film fund, there's not really a revenue model I found for youth content for the moment. The filmmakers represented by Cinetic in the States, and they helped us try to find a sale, but those offers were really low figures. So that's not really, so voila.
And how is it when you work with a broadcaster? How much liberty do you have to send your film to film festivals, or maybe get some theatrical distribution before
Everything.
broadcasted?
They only have the rights for Belgian territory and for the limited to the Flemish-speaking part. So we keep a lot of rights, a lot. And but like I said, it's the market for selling them, and that's something we addressed last year at IDFA. It's really hard to sell youth content because mostly.
And now you're frozen again, just when it was getting interesting. Maybe you can log on and off, or we come. Oh, yes, you're back. You're back. Please continue that thought.
I didn't know where I was interrupted.
You mentioned that you addressed the problem at IDFA, and then. Are you still there?
I didn't hear that. Yeah, I didn't hear you. Sorry.
So yes, you stopped at IDFA and then you were gone.
Yeah, last year at IDFA, together with the Documentary Association of Europe, we addressed the issue of how to sell youth content, because there's not a lot of sales agents who are taking on these kind of projects, and it's really that's really territory still to explore.
Well, it's also interesting. There's, of course, two very different models of looking at content for young audiences, just as with any film, basically. You have TV and online platforms where people look quite individually, and where it's maybe important that your film is suitable for the entire family and not just for the young audience. And then you have a model where school classes visit the cinema, like in a festival, like Lucas, or through educational programs. So those are two very different ways of distributing film.
I just have a question for Cole, if I might.
Sure.
Cole, can you reveal? Is that something you can say how much YouTube paid for your documentary?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why not. So that documentary, the original budget was 1.5. Because of COVID, postponement of the games, we went over about $500,000. So YouTube put all 2 million into the making of that film.
Yeah, we could make like 10 films for that.
more.
Yeah, you can do a lot with that.
You have archive and clearance and lots of things, which makes it expensive.
Yeah.
And Maarten?
But that's I mean, that's very well funded for, and I have a feeling that maybe YouTube could maybe buy more youth content, because
well, YouTube is doing quite a, just speaking about like a network right now, that's kind of changing how they're approaching things. They had a lot of success with their Dear Class of 2020 project, which was during COVID, a massive virtual commencement with keynote speakers like Barack and Michelle Obama, Beyonce. And they're kind of moving a lot of their content to be more in these like 2-hour special, world, but also, they're going after like tentpole events. They're doing programming that's around Earth Day. They're doing programming that's around Black History Month. They're a network that, unlike some other networks where they're not shying away from hard conversations, they want to be involved. And I think that's because YouTube knows their audience, and their audience is filled with young creators who have a point of view and have a perspective. And a lot of young creators, and I'm sure, Ken, you experience this with your film, where you know, young people, they want to be in the driver's seat. You know, when they're talking about a tough, complex issue that's affecting them, they don't necessarily want to pass the mic to some older person or some person that might not experience what they're experiencing. And so I think YouTube is really self-aware of, you know, who participates, who watches on their platform, and they just ultimately want to, again, pass them the mic and let them share the story and share their perspective, which I think is really awesome to see from a network.
And Kim, can you tell us how much revenue the project made?
Well,
or is this something?
Well, it's premature because we're still, we just sold the ZDF actually, like this week or last week. So we're doing international, and so it's very premature to say.
How much was the budget for the project?
She already mentioned, Maarten.
I'm sorry.
Toward 2 million, yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
So, well, the production aspect is incredibly important for us filmmakers, obviously, as well as is the distribution. But I would like to go a bit more to people we have on the panel here that specialize also in developing programs on actually how to reach audiences, not just how to make money with it. So we have, I would like to start with you, Eroll. DOKUFEST in Prizren organizes the so-called DocuLab, which is a very special program. It's for kids, for teachers, but also for up-and-coming filmmakers. You have year-round activities, as far as I understand, in the entire country. Why did you set up this program? What is it about? And also, what was the film landscape like in Kosovo when you started, and what is it like now? Maybe you can give us a short overview.
Well, it's really nice to be here and to hear different experiences from the perspective of filmmakers, producers, but also, you know, different festivals that use, you know, that provide content to young audiences, but not only. 12 years ago, we started this DokuKids program in the festival, and we realized that there is no other content throughout the year for children and for young audiences other than, you know, what we were providing at the festival. And this is when we realized how important it is to start distributing films to the schools. And we started creating cinema clubs in high schools, which was quite a challenging. I mean, our approach is trial and error. You try one thing, it doesn't work, you change, you adapt, and then of course learn from the others. For example, we've learned from POV of Public Broadcasting Service of the US, of their platform, how they use film in the schools, and in some other places where organizations work directly with teachers. And this is when we realize how important it is to work with teachers and train them in how to incorporate documentary film in particular.
But how open were they? Because here, I think, Maya, you can also tell a bit about the challenges of working with schools and teachers who have their fixed curriculums and sometimes very different priorities from what we think is important.
Yeah, in Kosovo, the old curricula was not allowing anything. It was very traditional, very one-sided way of, very traditional way of teaching. But in 2016, new curricula had a lot of loopholes that allowed us to kind of find ways how we can incorporate film into the classroom, into the curricula. So basically, we were asking teachers, around 20 teachers around the country, how much time do they spend in searching for content that they need for their class, for a certain subject.
Because looking on the internet.
Researching, and it was between 2 to 4 hours. So basically we said, like, how would you feel if we provide you these tools and you don't have to, you know, waste your time, but you have to come to a workshop with us and identify all of the subjects and lessons where we can find films. So basically it was a 2-day workshop. We identified around 40 different lessons. And then the ball was on our court. So we then needed to find films. On one hand, we have film production that we do with high schoolers. So basically we do films, we produce films made by students for students. So basically youth for youth. And on the other hand, we partnered with different organizations. We have this regional network, this Balkan Documentary Distribution Network, which incorporates all countries of former Yugoslavia plus Albania. And we partnered with the Y Foundation in Denmark because they have a lot of content, a lot of curated content that was kind of helping us to select films that would be appropriate.
Yeah, maybe you can say a few words about the Y Foundation and the programs that they've been doing, the topics that they've been focusing on. Maybe not everyone is familiar with it.
Yeah, the Y Foundation in Denmark, they commission films, 45-minute films for public broadcasters in countries, what they call the third world countries. So basically, you know, in Asia, in countries where state does not subsidize films, documentary films for general audience. So basically they commission these films and then they provide them for free in these countries or for a very, very small amount of...
They're not specifically targeted at young audiences, right? These are just documentaries across the board.
No, but I mean, every film can be for young audiences. I mean, if a film treats a topic of climate change, you know it is for young audiences. Young people made this movement, you know, about the climate change. If there are films about gender equality or women empowerment, it's very important because, for example, sexual harassments exist everywhere. And, you know, we try to use these films to screen not only to young audiences, but also parents, because we also have a program for parents as well, where we organize screenings through our traveling cinema, traveling around the country, and then have screenings where we have both students and parents. And usually we screen films that are produced by students through our film school, which is called Future is Here, which basically for 9 years was producing short films up to 7 minutes, creative documentary films. They were mentored by filmmakers from the region primarily. And some of these films have traveled to many, many festivals, and some are very brave. For example, I can mention that the first film about transgender community in Kosovo was made from a 16-year-old kid from our film school, because, you know, they didn't think politics, right or wrong. They wanted to send a message, and, you know, they just made the film.
I think it's quite amazing and also a lovely example, really, like DOKUFEST in general, because it shows the strength of such an organization when you work on so many levels. Like you have the festival, which is like a catalyzer for so many other things, not just for film culture, but also for social change and indeed cinema education. And a lot of new filmmakers are coming out of Kosovo who have been traveling the festivals very actively, like over the past years.
Yeah, actually, this year was it was the most successful year for Kosovo cinema. And we are really proud because two of the films that kind of made the mark are our former students, the ones that did the first steps at DOKUFEST. For example, we have Norika Sefa, a very young filmmaker that started as 18 years old at DOKUFEST. She did her first feature that won an award in Rotterdam.
Looking for Venera.
Looking for Venera, yes. Yeah. And then we have Reichert, also one of the students that works with us and who made the first Kosovo film in Locarno, that appeared in Locarno. And both films are, you know, about liberation, sexual liberation in a way. One is about, you know, the gay community, and the other one it's about young girls who want to, you know, who fight the patriarchy.
Yeah, but it kind of shows how important it is for a festival also to focus on young audiences and provide this education, which is also something that DOKUFEST Munich is doing with Maya Reichel's program. You represent another successful example of documentary film program for, let's call them kids in the wider sense. And you've brought a presentation of your activities actually. So perhaps you just want to introduce yourself and also what you've been doing for Dok.education. If you switch on your mic, yeah.
Hello, wonderful. Yeah, so I'm coming from Munich and I'm very happy to be here in Frankfurt at the Lucas Film Festival, and has been very interesting. I've seen all the films. We have the panelists here right now, so I'm looking forward to go home and show these films to my kids. I have two 16-year-olds at home, and so thanks for all the festival here and for having us. And I brought a program which is also co-working together with Lucas, so the teachers can here use the same program that we have in Munich. It's a cooperation we have here. And we came from our side to the fact that it's important that kids, we experienced when they have been in the cinema, they were sitting and saying, oh, we thought we're gonna see a real film, not just a documentary. And this was in the first place. And when we manage in the end that they go out and ask, where can we see more of these films, then we did our job the right direction. So what we did, maybe we can see the PowerPoint. They are just trying. Yeah, there it's coming. So let's see if it's working. In the rehearsal, I could skip it. Now I can't. Yeah. But I can just, until it's working, I can explain a little bit more, because I think it's really important to target the young audience. It's a little bit with documentary, it's a little bit like theater or opera, that young kids do not want to go there by themselves. And it helps a lot to have like hand takers that bring them to the cinema. So we found out that these workshops work really well, where we have a short documentary film like the one Maarten is presenting. So it's creative documentaries. It's not about the subject of the film, it's the creative form of the film that we show them. And we involve them in seeing this film. So, which is important that the kids realize that documentary film is not just showing the reality. It's a story made out of reality. So what they do need is a certain kind of film literacy or media competence to read documentaries, so they can understand that the documentary is showing reality, but it's not like the truth. It's a story made out of the reality. And this is what helps us coming to the schools, because teachers love film literacy and media competence. And this is why they come to our place. So here you can see the kids are involved. The kids are meeting the filmmakers. And then came the pandemic, and due to the pandemic, we have to change to go online, and we did an online platform, online cinema, where we show 3 films for 3 different age groups. And therefore we did moderation of the films. We did school material, we did an interview with the directors, and we all put it in this online cinema room, which we gave a password to the classes. So the first time, due to the pandemic, it's not only the kids in and around Munich that could watch the documentaries in the cinema, but also the kids all over Bavaria. So it helps us to spread the audience, to widen the audience. And this is what it looks like. So behind each little picture, there's something they can find out about cinema, about the film, about the movie, and about the director. And this is the school material. So this is it. This is our program. And beside of this, so you can finish with the, beside this, I think it's really, really important as you do it, to do the teacher training, because the teachers are the ones who are the multipliers for these documentaries. And even the teachers, they don't know what documentary is. Even for the teachers, it's the same, that they think it's reality. I mean, it is reality. We don't have to talk about this, but this is it was a nice backdoor to come into the schools with the film literacy and then do the lobby work for the documentaries. This is what we do.
I have a question for both of you. Like, what are the main challenges when working with schools? Because we both know it's not that easy. And also, what kind of schools do you reach? What kind of schools are generally willing to work with you? Are these just elite gymnasium grammar schools, or do you also have schools from different backgrounds? So it's a question for both of you, Eroll and Maya.
Well, we primarily work in suburbs. We don't work in urban areas, because these elite schools, they have better equipment. They are in a way more elite in a society, but working in suburban areas, it's very interesting because you immediately identify new talents. Young people are more eager to experiment. They have stories to tell. Their life is richer in terms of stories of things that they do. But also it's easier to work with teachers, because teachers also are very willing to work with us in developing, similar to what you do in Doc Munich, developing didactic materials that are aligned with curricula and are like a supplement material for using film in classroom.
And how did you get teachers to take part in your workshops? Like, what was the incentive?
Well, initially we paid them. We had a budget, and we identified teachers that were interested. That were
time and emotional labor should be subsidized.
But they developed.
Yes, in principle, yes.
They developed a platform for us, so they continue to support us. This was initial payment for them to start identifying lessons, connecting films with the national curricula, and becoming advocates for our program. So basically they started multiplying this with other teachers in their schools. They were always telling them, like, you don't have to go to YouTube, or somewhere else to search for educational materials, for hours and hours, but you have here everything systemized, and it's very simple. So basically it's an open source platform which is open to all teachers that teach in public schools. And also the films that we have produced, we have opened up wider to the region. So basically, people in North Macedonia, Albania, or Montenegro can access these films free of charge. And those are free of charge. Whoever wants, they can go there and, identify films that are systemized. You have, films that are for psychology, sociology, different subjects, and they can use them for free.
Maya, what is your
we are in Munich, and this is a city with a lot of cultural things that teachers could do. So in the beginning, it was really hard to be there and saying, we are working with documentary, this is art, please come. That would never work. And it doesn't work to give just the program flyers to the schools or address the directors. And I was searching in the beginning for a way where I just put the information once there, and hopefully the government is spreading it or something like that, to have a short access to the school, which doesn't work. It doesn't work. So I started with the small steps. I went to the first school, talked to the director, convinced him to let me in where all the teachers come together. So I had 90 teachers, even the mathematics teachers there who doesn't care about me. But in the end, they gave me like 5 to 10 minutes and I explained what is documentary, why is it so important to have it, what is the media literacy, what is the effect for the kids learning on an eye level with these creative documentaries. And in the end, it's about like 15 teachers that gave me their email address. And these I put in my
It's always personal, isn't it?
It's
about
totally
people,
personal.
yeah.
And afterwards, when you send the newsletter to these 15, they are willing to open it. And this is how I continued. So it took me like 2-3 years, and then it's spreading. And also the other way around, we do teacher trainings where we tell teachers how to work with kids practically, and then tell them what we have in our program as well. So it's always that you address the teachers directly, and then they are multiplayers. And this is how we now have a newsletter that is really working. So when we send out the new program, it's immediately they call and say, we want this time slot, we want the material, we want to have the online program and so forth. So this is really, I couldn't believe it in the beginning, but you have to do it very personally and step by step.
And being consistent always. I just wanted to add, we were known as a film festival in a city without a cinema. That started as a film festival in a city without a cinema. And today, our city of less than 200,000 inhabitants has 16 cinemas. So that was a big change, which allowed us to run our cinema as an educational cinema, and our landmark old Lombardi cinema becoming a cinema for film literacy, where we screen classics, we bring filmmakers, artists that talk about this intertwining of art and education. And in terms of the challenges, in previous years we were just some hippies that were screening dangerous films in schools. But today we are accredited by Ministry of Education, to expand this program throughout the country. So, just being consistent and persistent, it always works.
I'm going to go to Brigid. I've been ignoring you this entire time. I'm sorry. Your organization represents basically all documentary filmmakers of Europe in the broadest sense of the word. What specific activities does they have in store for filmmakers that want to produce documentaries for children and young audiences?
Well, I'm so excited to be here because we launched Day in February of 2020, which was possibly not the ideal time to launch a grassroots movement that requires face-to-face in-person meetings. And the thing that I'm actually the most excited about is that everybody here is a member of Day, with the exception of DOKUFEST. But I know in your hearts you are, and you're also fundamental to the founding of the association. So you count as members even if you don't pay your dues. And especially a really big thank you to the DFF, who also were amongst our founding members, actually, and really helped us kick off last year in a way with institutions that kind of helped us show that we weren't just a kind of ragtag bunch of hippies hanging around demanding our rights. And also I'm so pleased because Maarten is here with us today from Belgium, and he's really been the driver of the work that we were doing last year that culminated in a meeting at ITFA. I would say, first of all, like from my perspective, one of the reasons why we founded the association, so maybe just to introduce us briefly, the Documentary Association of Europe, or DAY as we call it for short, is a pan-European network for documentary professionals, but it's for everybody. So it's not a producer's lobby, nor is it like a collection agency, nor is it a union. It's a association that represents everybody from film funds to the most independent sound designer inside of our industry. You can join as a institution or as a company, or you can join as an individual. Everybody gets the same amount of votes so that we can keep it as fair as possible when we have democratic things to decide on. But it was born also because we really needed to address some issues that were occurring inside of the European marketplace, including some of the things that we've touched on today. And in particular, because we were concerned about growing generation gaps inside of the industry, where you had people who'd worked in one system where you had things like straight commissions and a healthy ecosystem for distribution, and then another system which was kind of the co-production system, and then this access to the international market and addressing international audiences, which is another generation, and then a new generation that is operating in economic scarcity, but enormous audience potential and an explicit kind of expectation to constantly perform and deliver inside of these neoliberal structures when the finances to do so are simply not there. And so when you have these three groups discussing amongst themselves how the industry should work, they were never kind of coming together, meeting together to inspire each other even. It's usually lobby work, which is something that we do, isn't about arguing with people. It's about bolstering around a cause and supporting each other so that we can usually just keep the territory that we have and not actually gain more. And so when Maarten came to us and asked if we could do some things around youth documentaries, it seemed, or producing documentaries for young audiences, it seems like the perfect place to actually start in our lobby work. So I'm so grateful for that. And when I hear what the filmmakers have been saying, I feel very inspired by all of you. So thank you very much. Actually, we're much too conservative in Europe with how we approach youth programming, because we do worry about things like language versions, and we do worry about things like, oh,
Exactly.
how would
It's like that's why co-productions in youth documentary are so rare, actually, because we worry about cultural differences and that kids from one country won't understand kids from another and stuff like that.
Yeah, and actually it should be more, maybe we should be talking about frames of representation more, about young people seeing themselves on the screen as they actually are in their actual realities, even if we as adults perhaps don't like it very much. So I find that really exciting. And the other thing that I was just thinking on a pan-European level, and I would love to talk to Maarten about this maybe offline afterwards, is we have new laws from the streaming platforms now that they are forced to invest a quota of their yearly budget in European programming. And when I think about YouTube, I don't know if actually originals has been included in that group. And so I wonder actually if there isn't untapped resources for youth documentaries that we could really put our head together and think about how we could unlock those finances so that we could make more creative films. Also, because I just watched Herr Bachmann yesterday in a cinema, and it was just like the most wonderful, joyful experience to finally be with people watching a film about, well, not quite local people, but close by people. And yeah, you know, is that a documentary for kids or is that a documentary for adults? But, you know, inside of the German landscape, it could never be for kids because they swear too much. There's too much swearing. So I don't know if you could actually, anyway, these are these kind of like, and this is why festivals occupy such important space, because you aren't bound to the rules of broadcast and of course the internet too. So these are just my thoughts.
But still in festivals and also in industry platforms at festivals, there's usually a really strict distinction between the youth program and the, let's say, the adult standard program. But do you think we should mix things up more?
Sure. I mean, these classifications are quite arbitrary, and also they're kind of the residue of the public broadcasting system inside of industry programs now. Specifically, if we're talking about the IDFA Forum or the Doc Leipzig co-production market or the meat market in Sheffield, they're built around supporting public broadcast television. And when you are pitching to public broadcast television, you have to pitch to a slot. And so the person who's commissioning films that you see at midnight is not the same person who's commissioning at midday. But if we think about it in terms of cinema, if we recognize also that public broadcasting doesn't make the same contributions it used to the independent documentary sector, why not mix it up? I'm for it. Let's do it.
This is actually a question for all of the panelists here. What can festivals do to better support documentaries for young audiences? Do you have like any ideas or suggestions? Maarten.
So what already happened and what I really embrace is that they since last year, so since pandemic and having forced to go online, they have developed their own SVOD services in a way, and it's really nice that plenty more festivals offer screening fees for that. And it's really nice because it's always non-exclusive. It's for their own territory, so it doesn't conflict with any other rights. So that's really nice. And that's something I would like to see expanding for more festivals, because then you can really, make some revenue, and, on your even on the short films we produce. Yeah.
Any other suggestions?
Maybe from an industry perspective, there are already amazing markets working in youth content like Embrain or Cinekid, or there's another one somewhere that just slips my mind after a busy work week. But to really, to find ways to still maintain its integrity, because not everything needs to be infiltrated by everyone all the time, but to create like more bridges, I guess. And I would just love to think more about cinema.
The only reason I suggested this was because there's sometimes this misunderstanding that kids are smaller than adults. So films for kids need less budget, but filmmakers are adults and they have the same needs as filmmakers that make films for adults. So that's...
And as an adult, I love watching films that have children in them and different kinds of children. I also find it very inspiring as an audience. And that's why, I would like to see kind of a mixture of more like, I don't even know if cinema is the right way, but if you really think about, what the story needs in terms of like the financing and the distribution, rather than these kind of arbitrary categories of young and old.
Maybe I can add, at our festival in May, which had to be online due to the pandemic, we had this short film Dancing Abdullah, which was also here on the Lucas Film Festival. It has its premiere in the cinema. We had it online, and it was online for kids, like in the online cinema classes, but it was also online in the whole program, and it was one of the most watched films. The short film about this kid. The cross-section programming is one of your suggestions. Yes, that makes total sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I may add, I would like to speak to Maarten later also, because we are now educating ourselves in increasing the budget to be able to pay revenues to filmmakers. So to be able to buy packages, possibly, but it doesn't matter whether it's short, whether it's a feature-length documentary, as long as they have an aspect of, a thematic aspect on human rights, on democratic values, on youth relations, because we also like to screen this to parents as well, because it's often there is this big conflict of generations between parents and their children. So basically, we like to have them watch together and then have discussion when they are together, and those sometimes are very interesting. So we are always looking out for films, and I'd be really happy to talk and see maybe some titles and maybe start some sort of collaboration.
Brilliant. Well, I think this was one of the goals of today's panel. I would like to open up the floor to questions from the audience. Are there questions over here in the cinema? And if you at home have a question, please type it in the chat. Do we have any questions here? Because otherwise I still have some, but okay, I'll just continue for now. This is a question for everybody. Actually, what other film recommendations do you have for young audiences, like inspiring documentaries you've seen recently? Plus also, what platforms are they available on, like recommendations of maybe film festivals, online platforms, anything that you would recommend or would like to be known?
I would love to recommend the online platform, which can be used from all over, which is called Learning by Docs Europe, which is from Docs Barcelona together with Thessaloniki and together with Munich, but it's originally from Docs Barcelona, who funded the program together with Creative Europe. And this is a platform where they work with 25 long films, but the long films cannot be used in school classes because classes are like 45 minutes or 90 minutes. So you never manage to watch a long film in school. This is why it's better to have short documentaries in schools, or this platform is working with clips out of a film, which has thematic subjects. So you can see maybe if it's all about history in the 20th century. And if you type in like Holocaust, you can have a clip collection concerning this, but it's not that what teachers often think in the first place, that it's explaining history like on YouTube in short clips. It's just an excerpt of the documentary film where you can observe a person and her perspective, and you can add this to your lesson. So you need to be prepared with your own lesson, but you can open your lesson with these films, and you can open the horizons with these little excerpts from the film. And it's called Learning by Docs Europe. So I think this is a platform which I would recommend.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, the Y Foundation on YouTube, they have a collection of shorts and featured mid-length documentaries. Our platform, DOKUFEST platform, DOKUFEST-Lab, offers around 120 films that are produced by young people in Kosovo. And for the film, I mean, we just mentioned it, Miss Bachmann in the class. I mean, it's a really, really good film that we already got the rights for Kosovo, so non-exclusive educational rights, so it doesn't conflict with...
Can I ask you a question about that? Because I just was thinking in what I said before. So that film is like 3 and something hours long. So will you show the whole film or will you make it episodic? What do you plan to do with it?
We screen clips from the film that we connect with curricular program, and then we organize screenings in the cinema. So basically we are bringing young people from schools to the cinema, or using our traveling cinema and go create cinema experience in places that don't have cinema.
What about our colleagues in the US? Any recommendations?
It's tough. I mean, for me, the first thing that came to mind was that YouTube Originals platform, honestly, just because they're doing so much kids and learning programming right now. And it's quality storytelling, because I think, a lot of the times, a good film really just comes down to like the universal truths that exist in it. It's not documentary, but I think of Disney films like Soul, for example, that came out. I mean, it's a film that, crosses ages and demographics and socioeconomics. So, I think when looking at story and documentary, you don't necessarily need to cater it to like, this is for old people, this is for young people, this is for middle-aged people. It just comes down to like, what is the human story that exists in this? And I think if you focus on the more human emotions versus, the more, I guess, like hard facts of some things, those eventually come through as a truth. And I think that, the YouTube Originals platform is doing a great job at kind of leaning into the storytelling aspect and producing great stories. So.
Okay, thank you. But would you leave your 10-year-old alone with it while you're having a Zoom conference and that you need to focus on? Or is this more something for an older age group?
No, I mean, well, one, I'm only 29, no kids, so it's hard for me to like speak to that. But I would leave them alone with it. And, I think, I can imagine nowadays it's hard to find a platform where like you can leave your kid alone with, especially if they have a phone or whatever may exist. It's kind of like the wild, wild west out there. But I will say that YouTube Originals platform, and it sounds like the other resources that have been mentioned in this panel, those all are probably good outlets to set your kid down and you can run off and do whatever you have to do, and it can be entertained and safe at the same time.
It was a trick question. Kim, do you have any recommendations for us?
No, I mean, more of a, like you were just saying that the YouTube came to mind, YouTube originals, but it's hard in here to. No, it crossed my mind. I was just thinking out loud about festivals, the film festivals and the experience. I may be way off, but I wonder if hopefully coming out of the end of the pandemic more, as we come out more, if there will be more of a yearning to, we're all questioning what will happen with theaters and how much people will want to be doing live versus Zoom. And I know so much consumption of young people does happen online. So I may be way off here, but I sometimes wonder, is there a way that film festivals can provide? I feel like maybe young people are looking for more meaningful live events and experiences, having been isolated for the last year and a half, or I imagine that. Is there anything film festivals can begin to do that would be less exclusion, more inclusive for young people, whether it be financially or just as an experience?
I think it's a very good point, also making it possible for a school class to come to the cinema in the first place. Like sometimes even the bus ticket is the problem, and after the pandemic, I think it's more important than ever, for sure.
Yeah, I know that some of the more meaningful things that have happened to me at film festivals, when a festival has a good outreach program where they bring us into a school, as you said, or bring the classroom to the festival. I always love those opportunities, but there never feel like there are enough of them.
Well, would your film be distributed among high schools in the US? Is there a program that can do that? I mean, you mentioned a campus tour, but
that's us. I mean, that's us figuring that out and retaining rights for educational and finding grant money to sort of underwrite. We're really interested in getting it to particularly to community colleges, not just elitist schools, but community colleges in Black and brown communities where there can be really, it can be joined to keeping kids in the games to be future leaders and that kind of thing. So we're doing that on our own, but there is no, we do have an educational distributor that we're working with to book those things, but that's.
Yeah, well, I wish you good luck with that. I think it's a film. It's important that that kids see it all over the US, and community colleges is certainly a good place to start, I think.
Thank you.
I will just, I'm sorry. I would just recommend Kim and Cole's films to watch to youth audiences. So it was amazing to see. And I mean, kudos to you, Kim, for retaining rights and doing that kind of work on your own. That's not easy. It's quite tough, and I really applaud you for that. But also, one of my all-time favorite documentaries is The Crash Reel, and that's one which I always like to show to younger audiences too, because it's about I mean, it's about the impact of dangerous sports, and that's really an interesting one to watch also.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's always interesting to bring these two kind of paradoxical industries, the USA and Europe, together to inspire each other also. So maybe industry programming should be making more space for us to come together and talk about how impact campaigning in the USA works versus in Europe, and what the kind of benefits of the subsidized kind of world is that we live in versus the unsubsidized but philanthropic world of the USA. I'd love to see more of that programming happening in film festivals.
Yeah, I think we certainly had an exchange of experiences here here today. And also when I listen to someone like Eroll, who and also you, Maya, when you say like, okay, this working with teachers in schools, it's so much work. It took you 3 years to set it up basically until it was at the point.
Yeah.
How do you finance that? You know, like, okay, we have subsidy here, but you have to get paid somehow. So how did you do it in the beginning, Eroll?
We started it as a program that promotes democratic values and human rights issues. So basically, we had a very consistent donor, which was National Endowment for Democracy from US, basically supporting this program for a decade now. When we started,
this is great. So you could set up a program like that in Kosovo, but in the US there is no way of distributing in high schools. It's really, I mean, it's fantastic, but it's also a paradox.
Yeah, and basically, approaching education, then we could apply to any calls of, different foundations. So basically, we were supported by Kosovo Civil Society Foundation, by development agencies, for example, GIZ. With GIZ, we established 23 media clubs in schools where we teach, basics of visual communication to younger kids. So basically from age group of 12. And there are different ways how we, in a way, engaged our own government to start co-financing all of this. And our city, finally we have a new mayor and, who started seeing the potential of this and who started co-financing. But I don't believe in this subsidizing program because it's always, very, very tricky in a way. You can have it
unless it's institutional and you can go into the future.
Unless, yeah. But otherwise, now we have created our own program where we are starting the grant making process. So we already did one grant for a short film for experimenting with film, and we are going to have the second one, and this will go on for next 3 years, basically supporting young filmmakers up to 30 years.
It's sorry to interrupt. It's just I think it's really an important case study in how you build an independent audiovisual sector in a place. Like it could be a city, it could be a state, it could be a country, but you have to nourish every part of the ecosystem. So yeah, if the snobs at the top of the food chain want to keep making 3.5-hour films about grass growing in a field, then they also have to nourish the bottom of the food chain, which is the emerging audience. So yeah, I don't know. I'm constantly dazzled by the work you're doing.
Maya, do you want to add something?
We started the financiation with the city we are in and the country, but then a huge part of my work is finding throughout the year the financiation for the next year. So it's mostly private Stiftungen.
Yeah, foundations.
Foundations,
Yes.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what we depend on, and this is my business to re-evaluate every year and go on. So yeah, it's a lot of work to do, but it's totally worth. It's totally
and you've
worth
built
it.
up something, and you have something to show for it. That's true. Yeah, Maarten has a remark, and I would like to ask once again if in the cinema or online someone has a question. Okay, Maarten, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to conclude that the program that is in Belgium that finances the youth programs, there's actually third partners. So there's the Flemish Audiovisual Fund, there's Catnet, the youth broadcaster, and then the third partner is a distributor. So a part of this program is that the film gets distributed, but also gets shown in educational in schools, etc. And now there's actually a fourth partner which is coming on board of this program, and it's an impact partner. So they're building around certain films which are more thematic. They're building an impact strategy, which is really amazing, because that's really, as a producer and as a filmmaker, you know that, okay, once this film is made, it will be, it will be brought to the audience. That's super cool.
Are you going to do that with Angry, for example?
Yes, we're developing an impact strategy for that now. And so the third partner, the distributor, is Jeff. And but since last year, the new impact organization was founded in Belgium, and we're going to work with them to develop an impact strategy around that film. Yes.
Great. Well, I wish you good luck. I think we can slowly wrap it up if there's really no questions, or we also have the reception here at DFF afterwards, where
I would just like to. Can I just?
No, let me finish this sentence, then you can have your final statement. So I'm very sorry that Kim and Cole aren't here on the floor and can't join us, because it would have been lovely to continue this chat with you as well. But yeah, next year, hopefully you'll be here in Frankfurt. Thank you so much for your work and your contributions today. And now Maarten, I hand it back to you.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but there was something someone mentioned that looking down at youth content, it's, from my perspective, like making youth content is super important, because as a filmmaker and also as a producer, you learn how to connect with your audience, because youth content is the most specific target group we make content for at this in this stage. And it's a great talent development program that we have in Belgium for young emerging filmmakers. So I see it as super important.
I think
if it's okay, I did want to just mention one last thing, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah.
All right, cool.
Any of you, if you have any closing statements, bring it on.
Okay. I don't know if there's any like young aspiring filmmakers who are in the audience or on the Zoom call. I feel like we've talked a lot about big budgets and kind of the political and bureaucratic field of filmmaking. So I do just want to say, like, if you're a young filmmaker who's wanting to get started, I wouldn't get too caught up in the needing a massive budget to make the film that you want to make. I would look towards, your local resources that you have in your community, people that you can lean into and ask questions, look for support, and just start small with the stories that you want to create. And don't worry about it being like the highest production value or the best sound or whatever that may be. Just focus on like the story that you want to make and you want to share. And, especially as a young filmmaker, ask questions. Like, that's the beauty of being young, is so many people actually want to help you. And it's scary to ask for help, but ask questions, ask for help. And I think you'll be really surprised at how many people want to show up and support what you want to do. So, yep. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other closing statements from you?
I just want to encourage everyone to show documentaries and not to think that there might not be a wide audience, because these films don't have the same marketing budgets as fiction films have. So I want to encourage you to give them more marketing budget, to pay the directors, pay the screening fees, and put the money in there. Because if you spread the word and if you really try to distribute these films, there is an audience for documentary. There is. We realized this, and
it's growing
online and in the cinema. We had over 4,000 children watching the films, and yeah, so they wanted to watch it. So there is an audience. So just show documentaries.
Okay.
Documentary Association of Europe approves that statement.
Okay, great. So, Eroll, you have some last words.
No, I just want to join this call. Make films, ask questions. Tell your stories. Don't worry about the production value. That's how many great filmmakers started. Making small films with their telephones. And the importance of it was telling the story and then showing it to the audiences. And I join Maya saying that there are audiences for documentaries, but you just have to be constantly providing them with good films and bringing them to the cinema, because the experience of film watching in cinema is totally different from your, solitude in your own room, in your computer.
The German Film Institute approves of this statement.
And also, if you're an emerging filmmaker and would like to join the Documentary Association of Europe, we'd love to have you. And yeah, furthermore, to really support that, for sure, our doors are always open. I love it. And festivals are obsessed with premieres, and that's not just about films, but also talent discovery.
True that. So for those of you that are here, please stick around. We have a small reception right now, which was funded by the US Consulate. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for being here. Thank you to all of our panelists. I enjoyed this very much. I hope you did too.